want to be happy. And yet we've created an economic system that seems to now be at the point where it's driving unhappiness, where we've got high levels of isolation, we've got high levels of unemployment, we've got depression. Well, what's happened to us?
I think that probably by accident we've created a system where we're sort of servants to the system rather than the system serving us. So economics classically thinks as human resources being an input to the economy, and output is sort of measured in terms of economic growth. And I think we just need to flip that around really and think actually that the output should be about the quality of people's experience of life, and does growth produce that or not.
But to find a solution, we also have to know how we got into the hole in the first place. Well, how did we go so far wrong?
Well, one of the ways we went wrong is we've given too much prominence in public life to economics. I mean, economics is a non-exact, I mean, even to call it science in some ways is wrong. It's a way of thinking about a system, and somehow it's given such primacy in our lives. And so I think we need to do some redressing around thinking about ethics and morals and sustainability in public life, and making economics a servant to that.
Is this actually a critical moment to sort of try and change course?
I'd say yes, but I probably would have said yes to that 10 years ago or 15 years ago as well. But, you know, with the financial crisis, which is actually the economy, you know, collapsing under its own rules, its own systems, that had nothing to do with sustainability or social justice issues, but really just on its own rules, you would have thought that it would be a real time to think again. But we don't seem to be getting enough of that, in my opinion. You know, growth is still very dominant in our political life, and I'm not against growth, but we have to think of what the purpose of growth is.
So you created the Happy Planet Index.
Yeah. Well,
how does that work, and what influence can it have?
Well, one of the things that I would be critical of the environmental movement around is that they haven't really created a positive vision about the future. They have instead just painted the worst case scenario and talked about what the disasters are. And that's very good for grabbing attention. But fear is not the best motivator of people. I mean, it makes people run away. So I think what we've got now is, you know, we see climate change skepticism increasing as the science base increases. So what's happening? People are mentally fleeing the problem because they're frightened. It's too difficult, it's too big to deal with. So they'd rather believe it doesn't exist and that scientists have got it wrong. So I think we have to work very, very hard to have a positive vision about the future as the people at an approach goal. I mean, you know, all sports psychologists know this.
One of the things after Rio Plus 20 was this idea that actually the idea of a global solution is unlikely to happen, and actually the solutions need to be more local. People are saying business is one of the great areas where actually change is possible, and change is possible quite quickly. So what do you think the role of business is?
Well, business, you know, as we all know, is driven quite a lot by shareholder value. It's also driven by the visions of the CEOs, the people that run it, whether that's a small mum and pop company or it's a huge multinational, you know. So we've got to align businesses with the social challenges. And what's fantastic about it is that people are not dumb. We all know these situations are going on. Most of us would rather be part of a solution than a problem. So we get very, very rewarded and actually feel great at work if we feel we're doing something with a social purpose.
But Nick, what's the problem here? Because, you know, business is supposed to be rational. Stock market's supposed to be rational up to an extent. So, you know, we got what you're saying is there is this evidence that companies that do take this seriously do better, but then they're not valued for it. So clearly there's a reason they're not being valued. What's behind the lack of understanding?
I mean, rationality is just flawed as an idea. I mean, economists coined this phrase, perfect rationality. How can you be against the phrase perfect rationality? It sounds like you have to be imperfectly irrational, and that sounds just terrible. Well, the reality is that the way that human beings make decisions is not through rational thought. It is through emotional algorithms and heuristics. We basically feel our way to solutions. And so we take shortcuts all the time because we simply couldn't process that amount of information to make supposedly rational decisions. That's the great advantage of actually thinking about happiness and well-being and emotions, because that's the way we make decisions anyway.
If everyone wants a better future,
yeah,
and there's proof that actually being more socially responsible does have a benefit financially and economically, that still doesn't explain why are people not valuing it.
We get back to fear again and about control. Is that the way that most organisations are structured is almost a sort of 19th century military model of command and control. And so if you're in that hierarchy of management, you're actually, the way that you're rewarded, the way that you're valued in the organisation is based upon your ability to to influence and control people below you. Whereas if you're going to take a more well-being, happiness approach, which is more freeing, then actually you have to be autonomy supportive of the people below you rather than in control.
How are we actually going to get that sort of embedded into the system so that we've got meaningful change rather than just a few experiments or a few good examples of leadership?
Change doesn't happen linearly. It's not going to be an incremental change, just like no one really saw the Berlin Wall coming down quite so quickly. Change happens quickly when it's ready to happen and things adjust. I believe that sometime in the future a very rapid change will happen. I hope it's not driven by environmental catastrophe or massive social unrest. I would rather it was changed by people changing their belief systems and changing the way they organise them. And that's effectively what try and work towards, but change will happen sometime.
Do we need to actually lift the discourse up to actually talk about, bring in those simple things into the discourse? Because it feels they somehow get lost because they're almost assumed. I mean, is there a problem there?
I think there's a big problem there. I mean, we did this piece of work for the UK government, the Foresight report, on 5 ways to well-being. And the idea of it was like 5 fruit and vegetables a day. You know, what can you do for your everyday happiness? And they're very simple things. They connect with other people, they're being active, they're taking notice, keep learning, and give. I mean, you could, most of the religions will talk about those things, and they've been with us, for eternity, those sort of ideas. And yet they get crowded out, when we think that money and fame and popularity are more important than those sort of things.
And if you were to look ahead and to say suddenly you waved your magic wand
and what you believed was important suddenly was embedded in society and embedded in business and the politicians got it, how would our lives look different?
I think we'd have more time. I think, our relationship to time and rushing and speed and short-termism would change totally. I should think that's like music to lots of people's ears, because I think that's where we feel a great time poverty to rush. And we would take time to spend time with our partners, our families, our friends. And that would be the trade-off, is that we might have less money, but we'd have more time. Lots of managers rush to meet their quarterly figures and don't take the time with people. And actually, all organisations will say, give lip service to, their people are their greatest assets. But actually, they're not assets that you can sweat in the term, because they can go out the door. I think the way that change happens a lot is by conversation. I mean, I might be a statistician, but actually I always say to organisations, businesses, cities, don't worry about the second decimal place. That's my job to worry about that. Your job is to have a conversation around these things and actually think about how they change your policies, your practices within an organisation. And that's the way that change happens, is people change their minds about things.
Great. Thank you, Nic.